Okay, cloud computing. So basically, what is cloud computing? Why people want to move from the conventional, traditional hardware on-premise data center to cloud, right? So what is basically cloud computing, right? So if you want to start a startup company, what are the things we need? We need to buy the hardware from the hardware vendors. Then we need to have operating system. Then we need to have software, the licenses part, and all those things we need to buy. Then we need to have human resources to something like a database administrator, Linux administrator, to configure them, right? So let us say today my application is, let us say, used by 10 customers, and tomorrow there are 100 customers. So again, I need to buy the hardware, deploy the OS, configure the softwares, applications. Again, I need people, right? And again, I need power supply, right? And so basically AC to maintain it, to maintain the lab. You would have seen a typical data center. How does it look like, right? So it's a huge, it also needs the space, right? So to set up the servers, all the rack servers and all, a lot of cables and all the stuff we need, right? So let us say tomorrow, again, the application demand has reduced and it moved to 10 people, right? So the demand is less here, demand is more here, and the demand is again reduced. So we cannot sell the hardware if we buy the hardware, right? So something like, can we have a mechanism wherein we will be charged based on the usage, right? So this is the traditional by setting up a new lab. So for my company, I set up lab, I buy the hardware servers. When I say hardware, it's server, storage, network switches, and all that. Then operating system, Linux or Windows, and then we install the software, then we install the applications, and we need people to set up them. So we need to hire the administrators, and then the power supply, AC, space, and all these things are needed to set up application on premise. So this is called on-premise data center, right? So instead of doing that, let us say there is a cloud provider who provides the service, right? So let us say I want to use 10 machines. I'll get 10 machines with a click, right? So I don't have to buy the hardware. I don't have to employ the people. I don't have to worry about the licenses, power supply, AC or space, right? So everything cloud provider will take care, but he'll just give me the machines, IP addresses, and then I can set up my application on it and I can use it. Let us say I want to have a website. That website I can set up, right? And let us say today I'm using 10 machines. Tomorrow I need 100 machines, right? So with a click again I can get the 100 machines. Again, day after tomorrow, my demand is reduced to 10 machines. I can destroy the remaining machines, right? So using cloud. So what is cloud computing basically? Getting the resources from internet is nothing but a cloud computing, right? So what you need is just a laptop and the internet. That's all. You don't need any hardware or any software licenses or people. So you just need internet, and we get everything from internet. So what is happening internally? So someone else is doing for us. Like he is maintaining his own data center, right? He has a typical data center, all the automation in place, all the hypervisor, virtualization, all the stuff is in place. So when we request for a virtual machine, a machine is allotted to us automatically, right? So though getting the CPU resources, memory, and all those from the internet is called cloud computing. So what are the features of cloud? The main feature is scalability. So something like horizontally or vertically we can scale. What do you mean by that? Let us say today I have 10 machines. Tomorrow I can go for 100 machines, and again after tomorrow I can come for 10 machines. This is called horizontal scalability, right? And vertical scalability is something like today, let us say I have 1 TB RAM and let us say 10 CPU. And so my demand has increased for the website, right? So I want to have 10 TB memory and 100 CPU on the same machine. This is single machine. Here we are growing horizontally, we are increasing the number of machines. Here we only have one machine, but we are increasing the resources of the machine. So this is called vertical scalability, right? And second thing is pay as you use or pay as you go model, something like a post-paid payment. So we'll be charged based on the usage. So how much ever we use, that much only will be charged. So they are the something like your mobile bill payment, right? So they are the basic features of cloud. So who are the cloud providers we have? So the majority, the market share,
Amazon, yeah.
the major cloud provider is AWS, Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM SoftLayer, Rackspace, etc. There are a lot many, right? So these are the primary cloud providers. So we can just log into their site and register and get the machine up and running. So there are also services and there are also cloud models, right? Something like public cloud, right? So anybody can request a VM, anybody can request a service, right? We'll see what are the services and they can get it. That is called public cloud. Example, AWS or Azure, right? Or any of these. Or let us say private cloud. Private cloud is something like, let us say, have an organization and it is a bank organization and they are really worried about the confidentiality of the data and they don't want to keep that in the cloud, public cloud. They want to have their own cloud. So in the sense they have on-premise data center. In the sense they have a lab inside the organization and they are maintaining their own lab, but they want to have a private cloud so that anybody can request a VM and get it. Anybody can request a service and they can work on it, right? So for that they create a private cloud. Private cloud in the sense the hardware, the network switches, the storage, everything is inside the organization. They using a software, they manage the lab. So using a software, they get the machines running, right? That is private cloud. So that is internal to organization. So only people from that organization can use it, right? Then third is hybrid cloud, which is combination of both public and private cloud. Let us say one organization for testing and development activities, they use AWS, and for production, they use their on-premise data center, right? So we can have this way. So they want to have control over their servers. So that is like all their production servers. So they use their own servers for the production. They deploy the application on the on-premise data center inside the organization, inside the private cloud. But for testing and development, they use AWS or Azure, right? So that we can have that kind of a combination, right? That is called hybrid cloud. So here the example is we have something called Cisco Quicker.
Oh, VMware.
Yeah, so this is like Cisco provides a software that will basically manage the data center inside the organization, and also we can have something like an OpenStack that is also like for managing the private cloud. Okay. So this is the software basically for provisioning the servers inside the organization. So here it uses our servers internal to the organization, Whereas these cloud models, they use the hardware data center from Amazon or Microsoft, right? So in case of hybrid cloud, it is like combination of both. And third model is community cloud, right? So this is like something like a community using the services of cloud, right? So for example, there is a college and there are people inside the inside the college, students basically. So for their practice, for their POC, they use a cloud that is set up only for the college people, right? So they set up a lab and they use it, and anybody with access ID, a password, can log into that cloud and can use it. So that is community cloud. This is set up for a community. So these are the different cloud models we have: public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and community cloud.
So is it OpenStack? It can work with any hypervisor like VMware, or?
Yes, actually it works with any cloud model. So any hypervisor, any storage. So that's the advantage of using OpenStack. So basically, it's like all the underlying layers has to get compliant with the OpenStack, right? There are some standards. So OpenStack is like something like they have APIs. They just call it, and all these providers have to return the, in the sense, perform the job or return success or failure based on the call, right? So assume OpenStack is like a top layer, right? And underlying that there is hypervisors, there are management consoles, and there are storages, there are device drivers, there are a lot of other things. So OpenStack talks to all these things, but it is very generic in nature. I mean, it's like it talks to VMware, it also talks to KVM, it also talks to Hyper-V, it also talks to some other hypervisor. So the calls which we return, which we react to OpenStack API should be same. So that's the reason why now entire industry is moving towards the kind of common what do you call solution kind of thing, a common infrastructure. So all the device drivers, so all the storages, let us say NetApp storage and Hitachi storage or EMC storage or IBM DS8K or DS4K, DS5K. So what happens is, let us say I manage everything from OpenStack. Now I want to create a virtual machine. It doesn't matter what is the hypervisor underlying, what is the hardware underlying, is it x86 or PowerVM or IBM Power hardware or Dell hardware. We just call it, and internally it has to do all that job, something like creating a volume on the storage with some TB, assigning a CPU, and getting the VM up and running. So there are a lot of layers involved in this, and OpenStack's responsibility is to make them working, and all the other vendors like the storages or the device drivers or the hypervisors or the hardware is to have a common protocol that actually reacts to OpenStack, right?
Okay. So OpenStack just have created another layer on the existing infrastructure and manage from that layer.
Exactly. So that is like a common layer, top layer, which manages all these things. Okay. So again, I mean, if we go internal to the OpenStack, there is a driver for storages. It's called Cinder, and there is a driver for network. There's a driver for processing.
What is API? Like, is it like OpenStack API?
Yeah, it's like OpenStack API. Let us say there is an OpenStack, and there is hardware, right? So now using OpenStack, I want to create a VM. So what are the things I need? I need to have a storage that will actually have something like a hard disk of the VM, RAM I need CPU, I need device drivers, etc., etc. So these all come in between. So now, as a user, I just call something like create a virtual machine from OpenStack, right? So it will basically call CPU API, it will call storage API, it will call it some other API, device drivers API, etc., etc., right? So it doesn't matter what is the hardware here. When I call from the OpenStack, this API will just call to something like create a volume, create a CPU of one CPU, virtual CPU. So these all underlying layers have to react to this API and it has to perform that job, right? So that
Okay,
has to be, there has to be a common protocol or common this thing infrastructure.
Okay. So let's say so let's say if we have the VMware hypervisor, right, and OpenStack to call to deploy the VM, is those APIs are basically OpenStack APIs or VMware APIs?
OpenStack calls to VMware, and VMware has their own APIs or calls that will be made to the hardware.
Okay. So those basically, if in this scenario, if we have a VMware hypervisor, so those APIs will be VMware APIs, right?
Right. Just
Do we have to create those APIs manually, like how it looks like?
so it's
API?
like VMware will take care of it. As a user, we just have to use them in the OpenStack. So VMware, when they develop their own APIs, they develop their own software to
Yeah.
acknowledge the request coming from OpenStack.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what is API. API is a file, or
API is like it can be a Java program or it can be a C program. It's just like an interface. It's a kind of a bridge between the two components, we can say. Okay.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is about the cloud models, right? So what are the cloud services we have, right? So infrastructure as a service, infra as service, platform as service, software as a service. Right? So let us say we just open Gmail and there is no MS Word installed in the laptop. Right? But still, when we click on a document, we'll be able to open it in MS Word. It's like it opens in MS Word, right? So even though we do not have MS Word installed in the laptop, but still if we click on Gmail in the browser, it opens a Word document in MS Word format. So what is happening here? Actually, Google is offering MS Word as a service, right? So this is called software as service. We are getting software as a service from Google. Or if you have seen HRMS, you would have used HRMS, Human Resource Management Systems, right? So how do they set up HRMS? Here we are not developing it, we are not deploying it, we are not maintaining it. Simply we get the service from someone else, right? So this HRMS is to store the pay slips, store the employee details, the tax benefits and all, the tax claims and all we do in HRMS, right? So that is actually a software as a service. So basically we get the software from someone else as a service and will be charged based on the usage. So these are examples of software as service, right? We are not maintaining the software, we are not maintaining the hardware, we are not deploying it, we don't even have the software, we didn't develop it, but still we can use the software as a service and will be charged based on the usage. So that is software as service, right? And then platform as a service. Let us say I have few developers, they have developed the softwares. Right now I need something to run, right? I need to compile my software, I need to execute the software. Let us say I have an app, mobile app developed by developers, and I don't want to maintain the hardware, I don't want to maintain the software. In the sense we only maintain the source code, right? So I need something like a runtime to run it, right? Something like Google Cloud Engine. So wherein we can just deploy our app on it and it runs it. So they provide the runtime. So that is platform as a service. And if you take infrastructure as a service, something like they provide the virtual machines. What they provide is they provide IP address and the username and the password, and we can log into the machine and we can maintain the software, we can build it, we can create our own website in the VM. So that is infrastructure as a service. So something like AWS EC2, right? They provide the virtual machines. So we can log into the virtual machines, we can develop the software over there, and then we can run a website inside the virtual machine. So that is the infrastructure as service. And based on the cloud provider, based on the end client, these definitions may change. Something like, sometimes what happens is, let us say I'm an end client and I just want hardware. So I want hardware, something like x86 hardware. I want the storage, I want the CPU capacity, and all cables interconnected. And it is my responsibility to set up, install the operating system on the machines, and then set up the operating system, install and then configure the application and all, right? So, or let us say I ask my cloud provider to provide me operating system, because if I install or cloud provider install, it is same, right? So I just go ahead and configure my application. So it depends on the understanding between the client and the cloud provider, but this is the general convention. So infrastructure is they provide the hardware and we create the VMs on top of it and install and use them. Platform as a service is something like we have the software, we have the build ready, then that we just use on the runtime which is provided by the cloud provider. And software as a service is something like a service directly provided by the cloud provider. We just use the service and we pay for the usage, right? Is this clear? Okay, so we'll see some of the basic services of AWS, right? One of them is EC2, Elastic Cloud Computing. So this is a service from Amazon wherein we can request the virtual machines. They are called instances. Using the Amazon website, right? So first we need to register for the websites. We need to sign on with the details like email ID, etc., etc. Then we need to provide the credit card details, right? So this is a one-time activity. So once we provide the credit card details, they validate the credit card, and then once it is done, we can create the virtual machines. We can use the EC2 service. So based on the usage, we will be charged. So 720 hours per month is free. So we can use those many hours by creating the VMs, logging into them, setting up the application, setting the website or whatever. We can do that using Amazon EC2, right? So this is basically we create the VM. So there is a way to log in. So they provide the IP address and the username, and what they provide is key, a access key to log into the machine. So using that, we can log into the machine and set up the application or work on the machine, right? So for the first time, they'll charge, I think, around $1 for validating the credit card. But once validation is done, they'll the credit back the amount. Okay, so this is a one-time charge fee per month, 720 hours per month, right? And there is something called elastic IPs, private IPs, public IPs. And if you leave the elastic IPs without allocating to any of the VM, again, they will be charged. So yeah, we'll come to that part when we work on EC2 instances. But so basically, it's a good practice. I mean, to just for practice, let us say create the instance, work on it. Once you are done, destroy the instance or the stopped instance. So we'll be charged for the 720 hours of the running instances, right? So either you have to stop it or you have to destroy it. Destroy means delete it, terminate it, so that will not be charged for hours. Okay.
Santosh, I have a question. If we create a virtual machines and Amazon, we use it for 720 hours or 700 hours, we shut down the servers, and after a second month we restart. Are they going to charge for it?
Can you repeat?
No. Let's say we created a virtual machines. We use it 719 hours.
Okay.
In a month, and we shut down all these servers. That means we are not using any CPU memory, right?
Yeah, we will not be charged. If you use more than 17 train, then only will be charged.
Okay, but we can keep that instances, right? That means
yeah, you can keep in stop state.
Yeah, in stop state. Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Thank you.
But again, there are a lot of conditions. Something like you have to use one template only. You cannot use something like a huge memory, huge CPU. So they'll give one type of VM only that can be used with less CPU, with less memory. If you want something like huge memory, again they'll be will be charged. So just for practice, we can use it. But if you want to something like deploy application, then we need a machine with huge resources, right? So in that case, we'll be charged.
Yeah, I think the ideally is just deploy it and just delete it. Just use it and just delete it. And I think once we're gonna be, I think there's a way to check how much you charge per day also, and you get alerts. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We can always see the billing part.
Yeah.
Right. So also something like, so Amazon will have the data centers geographically located, right? So they'll be called regions. There will be something called regions, and there will be something called availability zones, right? So let us say based on this will be charged. Based on this, the amount will be charged differs. Something like, let us say there is a data center in Sydney, right? There is a data center in Mumbai, right? So based on the data center also, based on the cost also, the charges may vary, right? So based on the square feet that location has, they have their own fee structure, right? So let us say Mumbai is really crowded, and setting up a data center in Mumbai, in Mumbai location is really high, right? So we'll be charged accordingly. And a lot of other things which they charge based on something like, let us say, I want high CPU speed, I want high internet speed, I want high, throughput, high input output device drivers. So based on our something like requirement, they use that kind of hardware, right? So if we want something like very high input output performance, then we'll be charged accordingly. We'll be charged more. Or if you want something like, let us say, I want storage. Storage also, there are different storages. You can store the data on tapes also. You can store the data on hard drive. You can store the data on something else also, right? Really advanced technology. So if we use tapes, definitely they'll be charged less. And if we use something like advanced technology, we'll be charged more, right? So one region can have multiple availability zones. So let us say US is one availability zone. In that US East 1A, US East 2A, something like that can be there, right? 1A, 1B, these are the different availability zones. So basically they are the data centers inside one region, right? So let us quickly go to the Amazon website and create a few VMs and try to log into the machine. Okay, sign into the console. First time you need to set up. If you are set up already, we can directly log into the console. So this is called Amazon Management Console. We have a lot of services here. These are the different services we have. We have something called S3, Simple Storage Service, something called Database, DynamoDB, EC2, VPC, IAM. There are a lot of other services based on the requirement. Okay, so there are maybe around 50 services which Amazon offers, right? So if you want a database, we can create a relational database or DynamoDB. If you want the virtual machines, we can go for EC2. If you want some kind of users to be created to manage the AWS, we go for IAM, Identity and Access Management. If you want some internal networking, we go for VPC. And if you want something like a DNS to set up, we go for Route 53. So there are a lot of services which we can use in Amazon, right? So the first basic thing is EC2. So this is called Management Console. So I logged in with my user ID. So I'll get unrestricted access. So something called root access. So I can do anything. I can create the instance. I can delete the instance. I can give permissions to other users using IAM. We'll see that, how to do that. Let us say in one organization, I am the architect. For the first time, I am setting up the infrastructure for my organization, right? So as an architect, I define my servers, I define my storage, I define my S3 bucket, I define my VPC and all, right? Then I give permissions for others to access it. So maybe I can give just a kind of read-only permission, or maybe I can give full access to other team members, right? So based on the requirement, right? So let us say, okay, we'll talk about that in IAM. For the first, let us say launch instance. Right? If you see, these are something like when we installed Vagrant for the first time, what did we get? We have a pre-installed image in the cloud. And when we say Vagrant init Vagrant up, it will basically pull an image from the Vagrant cloud. That is a pre-installed image, and it will bring the machine up with that kind of that image, right? So in the same way, Amazon also has a pre-installed image that is called AMI, Amazon Machine Image. So what kind of operating system you want? You want Amazon Linux or Red Hat Linux or SUSE Linux or Ubuntu? We can select. And if you see, there is something called tag, free tier eligible. This indicates that we can use this freely. It will not be charged, right? So we can have our own AMIs created. We can customize our AMI and we can keep it there so that we don't have to do the customization every time, right? So let us say I want a base image, Ubuntu. On top of that, I install 100 packages. I did a lot of configuration changes. I did my deployed my application. So after that, next, if I want to spin up one instance, I can simply do that from that AMI. So we can create AMI from a running instance, same like Docker. How did we create, how did we customize? In the same way we can do with Amazon machine image. And so let us say we took a base AMI, we customized it, we created an instance. Then again we can create a AMI from that, and we can use that AMI for any other future deployments. So that will have all the customizations available, right? So let us take Ubuntu AMI, which is also free tier eligible. Ubuntu 16.04 is the version, 64-bit operating system, right? And if you see there are a lot of types. General purpose T2.micro, this is actually free tier eligible. So this has one virtual CPU, 1 GB RAM, and this EBS is elastic block storage. So this will come to later. We'll come to EBS later. What is it? So now here network performance, low to moderate, IPv6 support, yes, means the IPs which we assign to this virtual machine. It's IPv6 or IPv4, right? And if you see network performance low to moderate, so what this indicates, again we have something called moderate, and also we'll have something called high, right? 10 gigabit. So what happens is when we use something like low to moderate, So they use that kind of hardware on the server, right? So in a server, typically how does the server looks like? It will have huge hard disk. It will have the storage, RAM, CPU and all, right? So physical server. So it's huge in size. It is in a rack mounted, we call it. And then it has a lot of cables attached to storage, SAN, fiber channel cables, we call them. And it has Ethernet cables for networking. And then it has a huge, the AC power supply and everything is there for server. There are, let us say, 10 servers. So when we select low to moderate, we will be assigned a virtual machine from the server, which has, let us say, 2 gigabit adapter, network adapter. Or when we assign something like I want high network performance, then we will be assigned from a machine which has a very advanced device driver, a very advanced network adapter, right? So from that machine will be assigned a VM, and obviously will be charged high, right? So in the same way, you want storage from EBS or tapes or from SSD. So there are different kinds of storages available, right? So if you want high performance, we have to go for some advanced technology in the storage. So again, we'll be charged for that. So here, this T2 Micro is the only one which is eligible for free usage. So it has one CPU and it has 1 gig memory. So we'll start with this. Okay, click on next. And how many number of instances you want to create? So we can create multiple VMs, virtual machines or instances from this. If we give 2, it will create 2 virtual machines. Then we'll come to VPC, subnet and all later. But for now, IAM also will come to later. For now, I'll just create with the default options. Add storage. By default, it gives hard disk of 8 GB size, right? And this is general purpose SSD. This is the storage type which we are using. So again, it has some internal details related to performance, IO performance, throughput and all, right? And then we can actually use up to 30 GB of the hard disk. After that, again, we will be charged. So till 30 GB hard disk we can use. And if you want to create a new volume, we can create it. This will be attached as the disk, right? This is our primary disk, which is root partition. It has 8 GB of size. And if you want another storage device, another volume, we can use to attach it, or we can attach it later also.
Santosh, can we customize the partition types, volume groups and the file volumes?
You mean the name of the volume? Let us say I want SDA1, I want something else like this.
Yeah, SDA1, and on top of SDA2, I want to use LVM rather than.
I don't think right now we can do it, but this will only attach a volume. Then after that, we can create a volume group, file system, logical volume on top of this volume. Or
okay, how about the operating system volume? I want to create root VG instead of one single disk.
This is root VG, right? So this is a one volume group by default.
Okay.
And if you want to extend it, we can extend by adding another volume. So this is like a single volume group, root VG.
Mm-hmm.
By default, they give a root VG. Okay. Next, add tags. We can add a tag. So basically, like something like if you have too many virtual machines, how do we find out like which is what, which machine is for which purpose? So for that, we can add a tag. Okay. Then another important thing is security group. How do you want your VM to be accessed, right? So this is for security purpose. I want SSH. I want to SSH to my machine, right? So I need to enable SSH, right? So let us say I want to telnet to my machine. I need to enable telnet, or I want to access a browser, access a web server running on my machine. So I need to give access to HTTP, right? And let us say I want to give access to HTTPS. Then I need to provide HTTPS as well. right? So like this, let us say I want my instance to be pinged. I just want to know whether my instance is really up or not. Then I need to use something called ICMP, right? And again, here we can specify from only my IP, means only from my laptop I will be able to access the instances. My IP means my laptop IP. Only from this laptop, whichever I'm using, I'll be able to access my VM. Or custom. Custom means I can give a range. From this set of IPs, I should be able to access my VM. Let us say inside the organization, I'm creating AWS account, AWS VMs. So only that particular organization, only people from those this office will be able to access if I give a range. Or if I give anywhere, anybody can access. If they have IP address, and if they have the key which will generate now, then if they can be able to access any of the VMs which we create, right? So based on the requirement, we can set up the security group, right? So this will create a new security group. So what is the intention of security group? This is security group defines how do you use your VM. You want to use it as a web server, or you want to allow HTTP, or you want to allow HTTPS, you want users to log in using SSH, or you want to use allow users to log in using Telnet. That we can define in security groups. Okay, so here we can tell like it creates a new security group. So I'll say security underscore group 1. Created on this date. Okay, then review and launch. Okay, so this will give something like a summary what all we have selected. I'll just say launch. So this is the important part. So here we can generate a new key pair, right? So how do we log into a virtual machine? If it is a Vagrant VM, we simply say Vagrant SSH, we log into the VM, right? Or if you want to log in from other VM, we have the IP address of the VM once we log in using Vagrant SSH, and we can use IP address and log in, right? Using SSH, and if we set the password. So by default, for a Vagrant VM, what is the password? What is the password of a Vagrant VM by default? Anyone? Let us say user ID is Vagrant. What is the password? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so default Vagrant user's password is Vagrant, right? So default user is Vagrant. So you log in with Vagrant and Vagrant, you'll be able to log in, right? So in the similar way, how do we log into AWS EC2 instance? What is this? This is nothing but a virtual machine. This behaves exactly same way as your Vagrant VM, nothing different. On top of your hardware, we have created a Vagrant VM using hypervisor called Oracle VirtualBox. In the similar way, Amazon also creates a system and running with some hardware. I don't know what is the operating system or what is the hardware, because that is hidden. Amazon will never tell you what is the hardware they are using and what is the this thing they are using, hypervisor they are using. I mean, maybe we can find out if you have the root access, but by default they'll not be there. Those details are hidden, right? So this virtual machine is similar to what we have used Vagrant VM. The only difference is the access. How do we access the VM, right? And the security groups, right? So I want to enable SSH only, so I will be able to use only SSH, nothing else. HTTP I cannot access, ping I cannot access, or HTTPS I cannot access, right? So if we allow them, then only we will be able to access, right? So using public and private keys, it creates a key for us, right? So this will be in .pem format by default, and it can be converted to PPK. This .pem format using git bash we can directly log in, right? And if we want to use putty, we need to convert them to .ppk. I'm working on my Windows laptop and I don't want to use git bash. I want to use putty to connect to the VM virtual machine. Then by default it will generate .pem file that I need to convert to ppk format, right? Using puttygen. There is a tool called puttygen that will convert .pem to .ppk. Okay, but if you have git bash installed, we can directly use the pem file to log into a VM, right? So I just selected option create a new pair and I'll give key pair 25th 09/2017, and we need to download the key before we start the instance. So I'll just download the key. So this key is downloaded, key pair 25/9/2017 .pem. Then I can launch the instance, right? And this is the only option where we can download the key. If we do not download the key, we will not get the access. Okay, so the instance is launched. I can go here and see what is happening. So this availability zone is US East 1C. And the type is .micro, instance state is pending, and it will also assign a by default IP address, security group that we have selected, right? So once it is done, this status will change to running. So there is a VM that is spinning up. Okay, it is running and the status is initializing. So there is a public IP address 34.230.92.212 which is by default assigned. Using this, we log into the VM using the key pair.
Is it a static IP address or Santosh?
I'll come to that. This is not static actually. This is assigned using DHCP. Once you reboot the machine, IP address is gone. You cannot log into the VM again, and again there will be a new IP address, right? Okay. So to avoid that, we have something else that is called elastic IPs that we need to assign to this so that that will never change. That is a static IP. That we'll see later. But for now, we'll just try to log in using the IP address which we have been given, which is public IP. Okay. So to log in, this has to turn status is okay, right? Initializing means it is booting up. Okay. So how do we log into the VM? So we have git bash. Okay. So let me go to downloads. And there will be a key file generated. This is the one which is generated on 8/26. So how do I log in? SSH-I key pair. Then by default there will be user created EC2 user at the rate, or we can give something like -L EC2 user and the IP address. Sorry. Permission Denny. Okay, so what is the problem? So the instance which I requested is Ubuntu, right? So by default, Ubuntu EC2 instance will have a user ID called Ubuntu. Right, so based on the this instance will have a default user ID called Ubuntu, or if it is Amazon instance, Amazon Linux AMI if we use, or if we use Red Hat or any other distribution, it will have default user as EC2 user. Right, we requested Ubuntu instance, that's why we have to use a default user called Ubuntu. If it is any other distribution, we'll have a user called EC2 user. Now I am inside my instance and I can log in as root. Same like how do we log into machine using Vagrant user, then we switch to root user. So this is root user. Now I can do, let us say, what is the operating system which we requested? We requested 16.04 Ubuntu. So that is the reason which we got it, right? In the same way, what is the underlying hardware? So mostly it will be x86, right? So this way we have requested a VM, and using the key pair, we logged into the VM. Any questions? So here I can install my application, or I can customize it. I can install the package. Let us say apt-get install HTTP.
So Santosh, you export the key. Santosh, did you export the key from? Basically, you export the key and install the key here, right, in local machine.
Basically, I downloaded the key from Amazon site and I used that key to log into the VM.
Santosh, we can create, we can export your public key to this server, right? Then later on you can use your own keys.
For the for the first time for showing, I created a new key, but from the next time onwards, we can use the same key to spin up the instances so that we can log in with the same key. So there is an option. I selected create a new key. There is an option to create use existing key. Then we can use this key to spin up other instances.
So
right?
Same key can be used same key can be used to have multiple instances of different operating systems, right?
Right. Yes, we can use.
How can you show how did you import that key into your Git? Just one more
Git
time.
bash. Yeah. So what you have to do is open Git bash.
Yes. Can you just go back and exit?
See, go to Git bash.
Okay.
And then go to. I mean, you can just check what is your present directory, right? Then the keys, where is it downloaded? Downloaded to downloads directory ssh-i, and you go to the path where the key is present. What is the key name? Key pair and the name, whichever you have given, and then -l, name of the user, and then IP address of the VM. Where do we get the IP? We get from here. This is the DHCP IP. This will be changed if we reboot the machine or network is restarted, right? Open Git bash. We open the Git bash, and we know that where is the key downloaded. We know where is the key is present in the Windows laptop. Then ssh-i, the location of the key along with the path. Then user ID and then the IP address. Right?
Okay, and L it stands for -L is just
-L is for the user ID, or if you don't want to use -L, you can use this way also. Username is the rate.
But we haven't mentioned. Sorry, this is just for the key. The password. So once you enter that, what would be the next step? Okay, that is
it will log into the VM.
Oh, okay, that's it.
Yeah, that's
we
it.
We didn't provide any password.
Yeah, password is not provided because we are using the key.
Okay.
File to log into the machine.
So at the same time, we're going to use the same key to log into any other instance we're going to launch later on, right?
Yes, we can use the same key provided we select the option like create the existing, use the existing key to log in.
Okay, use existing key. Okay, you can name that key just like default key, something like that, right? Also.
Yes, yes, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. We'll stop here. Any questions? So we can request multiple VMs like this and then log into the VM and use it. Maybe if we have 3 VMs running, we can set up Ansible in them and we can start using, we can manage them, we can set up Jenkins. So nothing is running on the laptop, everything is in the Amazon data center, but still we will be able to set up our tools, website, deploy application, apps, or anything we can do using this EC2 instance, right? So after we are done with the practice, then just go here and instance state either stop, start, reboot, or terminate. So terminate will delete the VM. Once we do this, we'll not be able to access, or we can stop it and then at the later point of time we can start it. Okay, is this clear? Now I won't be able to access. Okay, can you try to set up the login and then provide your credit card details and then try to create instance? Okay, we'll stop here. We'll meet tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.